Hello and welcome to Nice and Blunt. It's Tuesday night and I'm going to do a live stream for the sake of the waiver wire. So I wanted to make this more interactive. Usually I kind of save it for just like the membership. And this year maybe I'll make these like just reserved for members to rewatch, but at least for now we'll keep it for, subscribers and everything. We'll keep it public. Anyways, I'm going to show you my roster in the subscriber league and talk about what I need. Then I'm going to go through like each position in my priority. Then I'll answer questions for like another 10 or 15 minutes after I'm all done. So let's get it going. Okay, so this is my team in the subscriber league. We did lose George Kittle, sadly. George Kittle is on IR, going to miss probably 4 or so weeks. At minimum, the injury was reported 3 to 5. So I'm optimistic the Rams game, after that point, he'll be back. But at least for now, I'm definitely swapping him out with Tyjae Spears, who I do have on IR. An interesting stash, but not available till as early as week 5. And if I'd rather keep someone on the IR, it would be George Kittle than Tyjae. I don't really want to drop anyone, to be honest with you. I like that I have Elik Ayamanor. He had 7 targets. He's actually a deeper pickup we'll mention a bit later. But I really like Jaden Higgins. I'm not going to give up on him. I considered maybe getting rid of Ray Davis, but Ray Davis versus Tyjae Spears, as of today, I still think I'd rather hold on to Ray Davis. Maybe I'll swap him out for Tyjae later on. I don't know. So I'm debating dropping either Ray Davis or Tyjae Spears. It's most likely going to be Tyjae, and then I need to pick up a backup tight end for George Kittle. Otherwise, I feel pretty decent with my roster. I don't have any other major problems. And one reason why I feel confident is because I also picked up the Packers defense earlier on last week. Like once they got Micah Parsons, that night I placed a bid on the Packers, and they looked amazing against Detroit. I think they're a really valuable asset moving forward. I don't think you need to have to start them this week in order to want the Packers on your team. They're really talented. Last year they were top 10 and they were really consistent. This year they add Micah Parsons. They just put up, at least in my format, it might be different than yours, 12 fantasy points against Detroit. I don't think Detroit is that bad. I think the Packers are just that good. So I love the Packers as the top defense. I do have Micah Parsons on the thumbnail, so maybe that gave it away. But let me head over back to the single shot and bring up this. So let me move myself over and we can talk about my running back priority. We'll pivot through each position, and then once I'm done, I'll get to the questions. I do see a star boy, but I'll save your question for the end of this. Okay, so at running back, my favorite would be Dylan Sampson. If there's some obvious guys that we missed in your draft, like in your league, it might be different. Clearly pick them up if they're obvious ads. But I think based off of last week, who you can plug into your lineup and immediately start as a decent flex play would be Dylan Sampson. He had 13.3 points in half PPR, 8 for 8 on the target reception usage in the passing game. Dylan Sampson is legit. And then Trey Benson kind of shined against the Saints. I didn't quite watch all of his snaps, but Trey Benson's usage was more impressive than James Conner was. So we know Conner is old. Trey Benson looks like one of the more valuable handcuffs this year. And there's a chance that he becomes in like a Bucky Irving situation. It's possible that James Conner, he's 30 years old. He's dealt with a lot of injuries. He might be washed. Like, he did not look good. Efficiency-wise, I would maybe worry about James Conner. But Trey Benson has a lot of contingent upside and maybe some weekly usage. He gets the Panthers this week. They are a terrible defense at stopping the run. So love Trey Benson as a deep league, outside of the top 30 type of guy. However, there is like some league winning upside down the line. Love Trey Benson if you have some patience with this pickup. But Brian Robinson Jr., probably one of the most valuable handcuffs. CMC already questionable, had over 30 touches week 1. That's unsustainable. You need the backup in San Francisco. So if he's available, pick him up. You have to prioritize him, especially if you have McCaffrey. And then beyond that, I think you're just taking on like a deep shot, and maybe next week we drop this player for somebody that's more evidently usable pretty quickly. But Quinshon Judkins signed his contract. He'll be back at some point. So as much as I like Dylan Sampson, I also want to keep in mind Quinshon. Maybe he's more coveted than Dylan Sampson. He might be the best option. I picked him up in one of my PPR leagues, my other league, not the subscriber league. And he's in IR because he was out. So it was really valuable to put him in the IR slot. I like Quinshon as a week 2 pickup off the waiver wire. Kareem Hunt is in a 50-50 with Pacheco. I don't want either of them, to be honest with you. But if you're going to roster Pacheco based off of week 1, you can warrant rostering Kareem Hunt as well. But maybe Brashard Smith is going to pick up some steam quickly. He was on the field in week 1. That's interesting to monitor. Beischel Tootin, Bigsby's out of the way, so why not take a stab? But at this point, you're getting kind of desperate. Like, we're in the market for Tyjae Spears, who I mentioned at the top of the video, is in my IR, and I'm probably cutting for George Kittle. Beyond that, maybe Ray Davis, if he's available, just because it's a valuable backfield. You might as well pick up handcuffs if running back is something you need. The depth inevitably will pan out. It's good to have a lot of stabs at running back. So that's it for that position. Let me pivot over to wide receiver. Let me pull it up. I believe it's this one. Yes. These are the top 7 wide receiver pickups, in my opinion. Number 1 is obvious, Hollywood Brown, because Xavier Worthy went down. Rashee Rice is still suspended. And Kelsey, even though he scored a touchdown, did not look like his old self. Kelsey's going to be 36 in less than a month. By the time it's Halloween, Kelsey is 36 years old. Keep that in mind with Kelsey. So Hollywood, very obvious, while Worthy is out. And number 2, I do think investing in Quentin Johnston is not a crazy thing to do. Like, he has the yak potential. The problem is you never know when to start him. But keep in mind, Keenan Allen is 33 years old, has dealt with a lot of injuries in the past. Last year, kind of randomly stayed healthy. But there's also a league-high travel for the Chargers this season. At some point, I think Keenan will go down. And right now, QJ is well above Trey Harris and especially KLS. QJ is not going anywhere. I do think Quentin Johnston is rosterable because Herbert, I think, is legit. Then at number 3, a player that's on my subscriber league roster already is Elik Ayamanor. He had 7 targets. Cam Ward looked decent. And against the Broncos, he's only going to look better and better. I think this week is also a big learning curve game. You're not starting Ayamanor, but in terms of stashes for the future, he's going to be the number 2 wide receiver in this offense. Beyond Calvin Ridley, there's nobody else that really threatens him. And Cam Ward is going to be pretty legit, a big upgrade from Will Levis. And then also, Calvin Ridley's 30 and a half years old. Calvin Ridley's sneaky old at his position. That's not a threshold that you usually want to bet on. Above 30 at wide receiver is a ticking time bomb. So Elik Ayamanor is my deep sleeper, but as wide receiver 3, that's still pretty high. Like, maybe you don't tolerate the risk of QJ. Ayamanor is a very valuable upside swing that you can stash on your bench and not have to start, that I also think you can get for cheap. Not many people are going to be bidding on Ayamanor because the Titans overall didn't score many points, but I love Ayamanor. He is really a good pickup. Then Cedric Tillman, one of our favorites in the draft process, but Harold Fannon's a bit more involved, and at some point Flacco probably takes a seat on the bench. I don't know how much upside that will pan out over the course of time, but Tillman did score a touchdown. Tillman, not bad. And then 5 and 6, we got Kayshon Boutte and Demario Douglas. Douglas scored a touchdown, but Boutte was way more involved. So I'd rather go with Kayshon. And then against Miami this week, I do think the Patriots could actually look amazing on offense, like Daniel Jones did last week. So I would take a swing on the overall passing game to look a lot better for the Patriots this week. And maybe Kayshon Boutte is of interest to you. And then lastly, I think Troy Franklin does benefit with the injury to Evan Ingram. I think Troy Franklin is going to be on the field, and somebody else needs to catch passes. It can't just all go to Sutton and then the running backs. We need a number 2 receiver, and Franklin was more involved than Marvin Mims. I think the Franklin breakout is actually not a bad bet. You can always cut them if they turn into nothing. Like week 1 could be fluky, but from the situation improving, I think Franklin is actually really interesting. I'd rather go Elik Ayamanor, though, if I'm just like stashing someone for the future. If I'm not getting Hollywood or Quentin Johnston, give me Elik Ayamanor. Next up, we will pivot to, I think, the quarterback position. Yeah, let's do quarterbacks now. And my preference, obviously, if somehow Justin Herbert is available, pick up Justin Herbert. That's a no-brainer. And Herbert was sometimes slept on in drafts this year. So Herbert, clear number one, but most of the time he's unavailable. Realistically speaking, Geno Smith is my most coveted option. He threw for a shit ton of yards. Sorry about that. I did smoke before this, so I got some cotton mouth. But he threw for like 360 yards, if I'm not mistaken. It was like an insane number, and I don't think it's really going anywhere. Geno Smith, where is it? Let me pull it up. I want to be accurate. 362 yards passing against the New England Patriots. Bowers is elite. Jacoby Myers is underrated. And Geno just looks good. Geno, I think, is a player to trust. So I like Geno Smith a lot. I also thought Michael Penix looked really good. And as Darnell Mooney gets healthy, that's only going to improve the passing game. So there is room for more upside with Penix. I think his week one performance was, kind of padded by some run usage that I wouldn't bet on all the time. Like a rushing touchdown, I think, is a little fluky. But he gets the ball in the end zone. He is a good option. I like Michael Penix as the number 2 pickup behind Geno Smith. J.J. McCarthy plays in the ideal scenario. He will improve. However, it's really the rushing value that I think is mostly padding why he has value. Like, without the run ability, I don't know if I would bet on him, but he has Kevin O'Connell. I trust that. Justin Jefferson, I trust that. At some point, Addison will return, and he's not going to look as bad as the first half of his pro debut. He came back and won the game. His confidence is definitely going to be building over time. Daniel Jones at number 4. I don't fully buy that week 1 was legit. I think the Dolphins defense is just that bad. So a big upgrade for quarterbacks facing the Dolphins. But Daniel Jones did have 2 rushing touchdowns. And that's one reason why we liked Anthony Richardson. The run value can't be denied. So don't forget about him. But I don't know if he's my favorite pickup. Like I said, Geno realistically is who I'm targeting the most. And then Aaron Rodgers, I want to believe that last week was emblematic of like what he can do. 4 touchdowns would be awesome all the time, but that's not going to repeat from a week to week perspective. He's not going to play the Jets every week. He was also trailing against the Jets. Like, there was a lot of motivation for him to come back and win that game. I think it would have been embarrassing for him. Whereas I don't know if he's going to have that fire every single time, every single week. So Rodgers is interesting, but I think the running value is non-existent with him. That's why I have him behind Jones and McCarthy. But in terms of just like pocket passers and elite throwing numbers, I think Geno Smith and Penix are the most coveted options at quarterback, in my opinion. Next up, let's talk about the tight end position. So this one's more relevant for me in the subscriber league. I am without George Kittle for a while, and I think Harold Fannin is the top option. I think Fannin's usage is only going to get better, and Njoku's pretty injury prone, and for a rookie like that to look that good in week 1, like, there's no hesitation. He needs the ball, and they're going to be trailing like crazy. Like, they're going to have to throw it. They don't do much on the ground. Even their running back usage was heavily favored in the passing game. So especially when Flacco's there, I would trust Fannin. Only problem, it's the Browns offense. It doesn't feel great, but at least with Flacco, I feel a lot better than I do with Spencer Rattler. So that's why Juwan Johnson is my number 2 pickup at the tight end position. Also heavy usage last week, and I don't think it's going to change very much. I think odds are defenses are going to leave Juwan Johnson open more likely than Chris Olave or Alvin Kamara. He's kind of just the ancillary guy. He's unlikely to get double teamed. That's not the case with Olave. So I think Juwan Johnson is probably legit. The volume, I think, is repeatable. Maybe not 11 targets every week, but like top 2 target for Rattler, I think, is realistic to expect. So those 2, I think, are the best options. But I did rank Ertz in my top 16 preseason. I do think the touchdown production is legit. The problem is his age. So he's probably doesn't have the same runway as these other guys that are younger. Ertz, if he goes down week 3, I would not be surprised at all. So Ben Sennett, a name to keep in mind, but for now, Ertz is the guy you want. And similar to Ertz, betting on touchdowns, I think, is probably a decent strategy as well at tight end. So if you don't want to just go volume that maybe dissipates quickly, if you don't want to bet on the Cleveland or Saints offense, then also consider Jonnu Smith. The way they used him near the goal line, I think, is very repeatable. They don't have that many like dynamic athletes that can get the ball over the goal line. So Jonnu Smith, I think, will be consistently involved in that regard. 5 catches for 15 yards and a touchdown. So we're betting on Yak basically, and that might be high variance. One week he might break it to the house for 60 yards. Another week he might get stuffed behind the line of scrimmage like 3 different times. Jonnu, I think, is like really touchdown dependent, but not a bad bet to actually get you that touchdown. 6 points is really valuable at tight end. That's why I'd rather bet on touchdowns with them than Hunter Henry and Brenton Strange, but I think they're both high floor guys at the position. Like, there's no way I'm not ranking them top 20 based on the production I saw from them in week 1. I thought their efficiency from a yards per reception standpoint stood out, and the volume is definitely repeatable. It looks like Henry might still be the top target for Drake May in the Patriots offense. Like, Hunter Henry, I think his usage is totally legit. Strange, he's clearly the third option. Like, there's only Brian Thomas Jr., Travis Hunter, and ETN. Otherwise, number 4 is like so obviously Brenton Strange. There's no other real competition for that position in the Jags offense. So he's relevant. He'll be top 20. And then until Kittle's gone, I do think Jake Tonjes, who scored a touchdown, isn't someone I'm going to completely dismiss. I'm probably not picking him up, but if he does have another decent game next week, it wouldn't shock me. They're depleted in terms of health. In terms of pass catchers, there's nobody other than CMC and Ricky Pearsall that has like any traction in the league. Like, especially until Demarcus Robinson is no longer suspended. I think next man up is the deal in San Francisco. So with Kittle off the field, Jake Tonjes will get some snaps, and then it looks like Mac Jones might get the start for Purdy, and he at least has more practice time with Mac Jones as the second stringers. So that's the only reason why I would consider it. Someone's got to get some targets. And last week, Tonjes stepped up when Kittle was gone. So those are the top 7. And then we will skim through defense as well. Defense is very relevant. And like I mentioned earlier in the thumbnail, we got Micah Parsons on there. Green Bay Packers are elite. Green Bay Packers look phenomenal. They really played well against Detroit, and there aren't that many offenses I think are like leaps and bounds better than Detroit. Like, I think it was mainly the Packers are just that good on defense, and it's going to be really tough to stop them from stopping you. I don't think many teams are going to be that successful against Green Bay. So I think just as an asset, whether you're going to start them against Washington or not, I don't care. The next couple games are Cleveland and Dallas, then a bye. So after that is really where the value is going to hold. So you need some patience to grab the Packers. But even if they're your backup, I want them. They were my backup entering last week. As soon as they got Micah Parsons, I bid on them. I wanted them on my bench. And now I have the Eagles and Packers, and I feel really good about that. This week I'm going to be starting the Green Bay Packers on Thursday night versus Washington. I didn't feel like the Commanders' offense looked amazing against the Giants. I think the Packers will give them a hard time. So I'm going to trust them. The Eagles get Jalen Carter back, but they also get the Chiefs on the road. And week 1 wasn't the most encouraging performance. So I actually prefer the Packers this week over the Eagles. And I don't think anyone's dropping the Eagles. Eagles are a top 10 defense. So that speaks to how I view the Packers. They're really that valuable. They could be like top 3 defense on the year. And in week 2, I want to be coveting like long-term upside that can win the league. So Packers, I think, can't be underestimated. And then I thought the Rams looked really good. They get Tennessee this week, so you can play them right away and feel good about it if they're available. I think the Rams are very legit. Then the Niners also looked decent against Seattle on the road. And even though they lost some playmakers on defense, they also still have a decent roster. And Robert Saleh, I think, is a key acquisition. The defensive coordinator was an upgrade. Last year, they had Brandon Staley. This year, it's Robert Saleh. So Niners, I think, are also in the mix to be top 12 every week. You can play them and not feel bad about it. They get the Saints this week, so obvious must start. And then the Chargers held their own against the Chiefs in Brazil. They get the Raiders this week. I'm a little worried about the travel coming back from Brazil. They're not my favorite plug and play. Like, obviously, I'd rather go against New Orleans or Tennessee. And I also did endorse Geno as a good pickup. So I'm kind of worried about the Chargers, but overall they have a good defense and they can perform well. Chargers at number 4. And then lastly, the Bills probably are wavering on available because they faced the Ravens last week and most people didn't start them. So also as like a key acquisition long term, the Bills are legit. But odds are like a lot of the streamers that we had last week have decent matchups. Like Arizona, who got New Orleans last week, everyone was streaming Arizona. They come home to face the Panthers. I think you're probably holding on to Arizona if you had the Cardinals coming out of the draft. So these are my defenses. And then lastly, I will mention it, but not often. I'm never really going to talk about kickers ever again. But in week 2, I do think it's a relevant position to mention because now is the time where if there is that really good kicker available, now's the time to get him. And I would like to mention Chris Boswell, who is like 80% rostered, so odds are you can't get him, but I think he has a ton of value this year. I think the Steelers will settle for field goals, and he can kick it from like 50, 60 plus yards. He has a good leg. So Boswell, probably unavailable, but I wanted to mention, I think he could be top 5 this year. And then Cam Little, I think is legit in Jacksonville. He's my number 2, more likely available than Boswell. Tyler Loop in Baltimore, that's a good offense to bet on. Same with Matt Prater in Buffalo. We saw how good he was to close out that game. And then Will Lutz in Denver, also an interesting offense to bet on. Bo Nix didn't look elite, and then they also lost Evan Ingram. They might be moving the ball, but then in the red zone had to settle for 3 points. Will Lutz, I do think, is a decent bet in terms of volume overall at kicker. And then Will Reichert also looked pretty good. J.J. McCarthy only looked good in the fourth quarter. Otherwise, you can't feel super confident about this offense yet. I do think the Vikings will be settling for 3 quite often this year as well. So volume, and betting on good offenses overall, like Baltimore and Buffalo, that's the tiebreaker. But a talented kicker like Little that can, in the preseason, hit from 70, and then guys like Lutz and Reichert in high-powered offenses that may sputter out in the red zone, I think are also pretty decent bets. Like if the special teams was as good for the Vikings going forward, there's going to be a lot of short fields. Like the new kickoff situation, special teams is a big factor. If you can get a big return, even on like a punt, but especially more than 35, you only need like 15 yards before the kicker's in range. Like there's going to be a lot of field goals this year. I think kicker might be more relevant than ever. So that's it for overall the 6 positions I wanted to mention. Now that I'm done, I'll put the timestamps in later, but we can pivot to some questions, and maybe I'll pull up my roster and show you like the bids I'll make later on. But let me scroll up. Starboy. There it is. Okay. First comment of the live stream. Starboy was asking, should I trade away Hubbard and Sutton for Brian Thomas Jr.? I might do that. Brian Thomas Jr., I would be willing to buy low on. I think week 1 was kind of a strange game. And then the Panthers secondary is a bit underrated. The weather delay was also kind of weird. But he still scored a touchdown, and I do think he still could be elite. The price, though, is high. I think you're giving up a lot. Like a top 20 running back right now and a usable receiver for someone who, let's face it, didn't convince you he was locked into the top 10 like when we drafted him. I think that's a bit pricey. I don't think I would give up both players for Brian Thomas Jr. But if you got a decent running back in exchange, like at worst, I don't know, David Montgomery, or even Austin Eckler, JCM, probably JCM. Yeah, if I could get JCM and Brian Thomas Jr., then I would give up Hubbard and Sutton. I think that's a more appropriate trade-off. But Gerald is asking, is Pacheco not worth starting rest of the season? Very disappointing seeing the usage the Chiefs are doing. At least until Kareem Hunt is no longer involved. Yeah, I don't think Pacheco has any starting value. I would not be starting Pacheco. That's for sure. So if anyone, maybe Brashard Smith is the bet. Like long-term, the rookie, just like Pacheco, is a 7th rounder. There's nothing stopping Andy Reid from like fully committing to the new 7th round rookie, Brashard Smith. I think that might be the most valuable option. Let's add Brashard Smith to the end of the running back waiver wire priority. Let me pull that up one more time and mention our full running back position. Behind Tyjae Spears, I would include Brashard Smith at number 8. The Chiefs' backfield is not established at all. There's completely just like totally up for grabs in the Chiefs' backfield. Brashard Smith, number 8. Put that in your mind. But I don't have the ability to type it in at the moment. Anyways, Shamrock is asking, is Ingram going to play next week? I don't think so. Let me look it up. He's questionable, according to ESPN. Did not return from that game against the Titans. Injured his calf in the fourth quarter. Prior to getting hurt, he had 3 catches for 21 yards on 4 targets. I think they can beat the Colts without him. I don't think they're going to force him onto the field. I would want a backup tight end this week if I had Ingram. It's unfortunate you can't just put him on IR because he's questionable, but I wouldn't feel confident starting him. Even if he plays, I would want another tight end. I'd rather have somebody else. I do not know what these symbols mean. I only speak English, Spanish, and French. So this person is asking, should I drop Jordan Addison and waiver wire Kayshon Boutte? I would not drop Addison just yet for Kayshon Boutte. Boutte is interesting to pick up, but I don't think I would cut Addison. He'll be back in 2 weeks. I can wait out Addison's suspension. I think the upside's higher with Addison. Jamie's in here. Nice. He's been all over Ayamanor this offseason. Also, Tillman. He prefers Tillman over QJ. That is where I would disagree, but in a similar tier, not that much different. Jamie loves Cedric Tillman, has all summer. Nav says lost Kittle and want to pick up both Fannin and Juwan Johnson. Do I cut Braylon Allen to pick up JJ? I think you could cut Braylon Allen. If you didn't have much running back depth, maybe I wouldn't do it just yet. But if you lost Kittle, you definitely need at least one of them. And if you need to make the space, then yeah, I would tolerate dropping Braylon Allen. He had limited volume. He did score a touchdown, and that's why I'm not dying to drop him entirely. I kind of want to give him another week or two, but I would understand leaving Braylon Allen on the waiver wire in exchange for a tight end. When you just lost Kittle and you need the space, I would tolerate dropping Braylon Allen if I had to. Nav says dropping defense for Fannin, by the way. I don't think you need both of them. If you really want both of them as just a hedge in case one of them sucks in the second week, like they could both be complete flukes. Then yeah, I understand that. Yeah, give me both tight ends over Braylon Allen and a defense. I think that's fair. But Dev says Geno's a baller. Dev likes our Geno take. RGQ says, in half PPR, do I drop Cooper Kupp for Keenan Allen, or is it an overreaction? I would much rather have Keenan Allen than Cooper Kupp. Injury risk is high with both of them, and we at least know Keenan has like some chemistry with the quarterback. Cooper Kupp is unestablished with Darnold, and Darnold didn't have like any volume. It looked like if the ball was not going to JSN, like there was no trust at all with anyone else. I did not feel encouraged whatsoever with Cooper Kupp. That looks like a terrible start right now. I'd much rather have Keenan than Cooper Kupp. Not an overreaction at all. Jamie says Fannin 72% of the Browns snaps and seen a 21.6 target share. Yeah, you got to favor Fannin above the rest, especially when Njoku misses time. That feels inevitable. He's already ahead of Njoku in terms of production that last week. So that is notable. Harold Fannin, totally legit. Chandler Constantino says 18-man league, start 9. Best 2 options on waiver is Boutte and Juju. We have 100 fab for a year. I love Worthy, so that spot is empty. And my bench don't have a starter. How much fab would you put on them? Not that much. I mean, if you also have like free agency and like, $0 bids available, I don't think I would drop more than 25. I think that's kind of pushing it. That's kind of egregious. Here's the thing about week 1. You don't want to blow your budget. You don't want to be the person that is hamstrung for the rest of the season because you're not going to win your league on the waiver wire, most likely, with just week 2 pickups. There's going to be some guys along the way that really factor in. And then you need some budget available for the playoffs. You can't go empty-handed into the playoffs. It's just not a wise way to go. So that's where I'm willing to hold back and just kind of go volume at the position. Like, even if I don't get my favorite option, I could still maybe get someone later. But in 18-team league, there's not going to be that many people available. So that's where maybe my experience doesn't really apply here, but maybe 25 is not high enough, especially if you have those $0 bids. Then I'd rather have Boutte. I think there's a bit more upside, but Juju, you never know. Like, Chiefs receiving core is crazy. If you told me, Hollywood Brown was this year's Sammy Watkins week 1, I also wouldn't be that shocked. So, like, there's no safety with Hollywood Brown. Juju could be relevant. I kind of wanted to put Juju on the list, but for now, I'm not going to do it. For now, I will pass on Juju. Who do I like more? I would go Kayshon Boutte, and I would probably wager around like $15 max. I don't think I'd go 25. I think I'd stop at 15, and bid on both of them. Should I pick up Tyler Warren and drop Travis Kelce? Yes, I think I would do that. I probably wouldn't drop Kelce. I'd probably have somebody else to drop, but I would definitely pick up Tyler Warren above Kelce. Rest of season, I'd rather have Warren. So in that regard, yes, but you can probably drop somebody else. Stick with Denver defense for the year, or do you recommend streaming defenses? I would stick with Denver. Denver's one of the few I wouldn't pass up, and I think the Packers have the chance to be in that conversation as well. That's why the Packers, I think, are the best defense to pick up. Yes, I agree with Jamie on this response to the Kelce Warren question. I think Kelce's too valuable to just drop. If you can trade him, that'd be ideal. But even as a backup, I probably would find somebody else I think I could drop instead of Kelce. Ryan says drop Ingram or Fannin. I mean, again, I don't think I'd rather be cutting Ingram. I think I would just want both. But at least usable next week. Yeah, I'm probably ranking Fannin higher than Ingram. But I don't think I would want to drop Ingram. Millie says, I have Judkins. Should I pick up Sampson? Yes, absolutely pick up Sampson. I hope you had an IR slot to put Judkins in, but for now, I think Sampson's for sure the more valuable piece. Steven Guerrero says start Fields or Herbert. Ooh, that's a good question. The Jets get Buffalo. Damn. Chargers, I think, will be okay, but not amazing against the Raiders on the road. Off the Brazil game, I think there is some concern of fatigue. But I think the Raiders just might be maybe more legit. The defense, I can't fully gauge for the Bills, like how bad they are. They gave up 40 points, but it was Baltimore. Could they be much better? They probably limit the Jets offense. But the Jets looks really good. The Jets offense was really good. I'd probably go Herbert there. I think I'm probably going to go Herbert. But it's close. Fields looked really valuable. Fields looked like a potential league winner as well, but I think Herbert looked better. I think I'd go Herbert, who also runs the ball. RGQ? I almost said RGP, but RGQ. Pick 3, wide receiver, 2 running back, 1 flex for week 2, please. Amon-Ra, Nico, Rome, Hollywood, Kupp/Keenan, Kyron, Chuba, Pacheco. 3 receivers, 2 running backs, 1 flex. Okay, so Nico, 100%. We got to trust Amon-Ra against Chicago. I wouldn't panic. And then I would definitely go Hollywood as the 3rd receiver. I would keep Rome on the bench. Same with Kupp and Keenan. For the running backs, you're going with Kyron and Chuba. And then in the flex, you're going Keenan Allen. You're benching Kupp and Pacheco. You're picking up Judkins by dropping Caleb Johnson. I think that's relatively fair. I mean, Judkins is definitely more talented than Caleb Johnson. There's a reason why he went top of the 2nd round. Caleb went middle of the 3rd round. And right now the path in Pittsburgh looks like really steep for Caleb. So I think that's fair. I think I would cut bait on Caleb Johnson, not feel bad about it for Judkins. but you probably end up dropping Judkins. Like, I picked up Judkins, and I'm expecting him to be completely unusable. I'm expecting nothing out of Judkins. So I'm hoping I'm surprised and happy about it. But for now, yikes with Judkins. Anonymous says, our Burden and Tesla were stashing. Yes, to a certain degree. I think I'd rather stash Tesla. But Burden also in the mix for a week or so. I wouldn't hold on to them very much longer if they look, the same as last week. Like, Tesla scored a touchdown, but otherwise didn't do very much. I don't think you have to. I think I'd rather have Hollywood, of course, and then I'd also rather have a Yamanor or Cedric Tillman off the wire as well. There's a reason I didn't include them in the top 7. But names to consider, if you drafted them and you liked them, you don't have to get rid of them if you don't want to. Not yet. 3.4 says full PPR, by the way, in your question. That probably doesn't change anything. I don't remember what question you had. Stick with Denver defense with a full PPR. How does that change anything? How does full PPR change anything on that question? You're just fucking with me. Soccer Mariana says, would you trade Mike Evans and Ladd for Jacobs, Debo, and Smith? I think I would. That's a lot in exchange. I would try to get rid of Waddle and Addison instead of Mike Evans. I think I'd rather do that as the trade, like a 3-for-3 trade. But if you can get Jacobs, Debo, and Devontae Smith, that feels pretty solid. There's a chance that A.J. Brown gets traded. I wouldn't bet on it, but there are some rumors it's possible. Like, imagine if he got traded to New England after never being, like, properly used for a while. Like, that, that'd be kind of interesting. For this question, I'd rather have Keenan Allen over Boutte, QJ, and Austin. I felt like Keenan was probably not available on most waiver wires. He was over like 65%. But Keenan definitely valuable, more than them. Harold Fannin will be my son-in-law after I marry his mom. Good luck, Jamie. Let me know how the proposal goes. Nico Rallos is RJ Harvey or George Pickens full PPR. Ooh. The thing about Pickens is he's not much of a volume guy, so in full PPR he actually loses value. But Harvey doesn't look usable just yet. Really efficient, but not enough volume. I can't imagine there's nobody else that you can cut. Like, I'd rather have both of them. I don't think either of them are droppable. So if you have access to either, definitely pick him up. I at this point though would go Pickens, but a month from now that doesn't feel like the better side of the coin. Long term, I'd rather have Harvey. Harvey feels like a higher value long term than Pickens. But right now, Pickens is more startable. Not by much though. RGQ says I'm dropping Caleb Johnson and spending 12 out of 10 on Fab for Judkins. Overkill. Highest Fab spend I've seen in this league was 10. Yeah, I'd probably go with just 10 or 9. You don't need to over commit in week 1, but we do have a $5 super chat from Ryan. Thank you for the donation, Ryan. You're asking, drop the Vikings defense for the Rams, drop Ingram for Fannin. Vikings are also very valuable. I think those upcoming games, let's see, the Vikings have the Falcons in prime time at home, then they get the Bengals, and then they get the Dublin game against Pittsburgh, and then they get the London game against Cleveland. I don't think the Rams' schedule is that good, but I'm the type of guy that wants to roster 2 defenses. I think either of these are perfectly fine bets to make. I think I'd rather have the Rams, though. I think the Rams probably looked a little better. And this week, I think they're probably a better start against Tennessee as opposed to the Vikings getting the Falcons. I think I'd rather have the Rams this week. So that's why, yes, I think I would do it. But after the Bengals game, I would probably pivot back to the Vikings. I think the Vikings in Dublin and London are going to be very good. I think they'll have a lot of value, especially the London game against Cleveland. week 5 for the Vikings. But this week, give me the Rams. Then drop Ingram for Fannin. I mentioned earlier, I wouldn't be wanting to drop both, but if you forced my hand, then yeah, give me Fannin right now. This week, I would rather have Fannin. But long term, I think Ingram is the safer bet. I think if not for the injury, Ingram would have looked better, of course, but I think last week was kind of just weird for Denver. I think Ingram long term has more value. So try and have both, but this week I would definitely start Fannin above Ingram. Jamie, you're not the only one here. I don't know if y'all noticed, but definitely a factor at this time. And then Nico says trade Kraft and Harvey for Tyler Warren, Pacheco. No. I'd rather have Harvey and Kraft. Nino says redraft trade offer. Any thoughts? Got offered Gibbs and A.J. Brown and my choice of either Monty or Tracy for Jamar, Pollard, and Etienne. Whew. That's a tough spot to be in. Let me know what you end up going with. I think I would probably go with the Gibbs, A.J. Brown, Montgomery side, but I wouldn't feel good about it. Having Gibbs, I think, wins the trade, though. I think I'd go with the Gibbs side. Flex, Garrett Wilson or Igbuka, full PPR? Good question. I'd go Igbuka. I would trust that the touchdowns continue, but a bad matchup for Igbuka this week. Meanwhile, Garrett Wilson gets Buffalo. Maybe I'd go Garrett Wilson this week. In full PPR, I think I might go Garrett Wilson. That's a close one, but I think I'd go Wilson. Barely. I'd want to start both. Igbuka is going to be top 15 for me again. I had him top 15 last week. He was top 5. Igbuka is a must start. So is Garrett Wilson this week. In full PPR, I'd give the edge barely to Wilson against Buffalo compared to Igbuka against Houston. Jamie says Hampton or Travis Etienne rest of the season. I'd still go Hampton, but I would understand why this week Etienne has higher trade value. If I could trade away Etienne after this game for Hampton, which I think is still going to be like a viable, bet to make, I would much rather have Hampton after this week. I think he'll start to look much better after this game. Millie says Woody or Caleb. Neither. I think you can find better. Nico says trade or hold Jamar Chase. Hold on Jamar Chase. 3.4. No, I had a message that you didn't get. LOL. I'll rescind. I have Neighbors, Garrett Wilson, Drake London, Igbuka, plus suspended Rashee Rice and Addison. Trade which two to bring back best haul without losing much value, full PPR. I would trade Addison if I could. I would also trade Garrett Wilson, but odds are you can get the most in return for Neighbors. But if I could get rid of Garrett Wilson and Addison and get, a usable running back, like if I got ETN hypothetically in that trade, I'd probably do that. Yeah, I agree with Jamie here. I don't think I would drop drop either Ingram or Fannin. I don't feel like I would do that. Hun says start Hubbard or Travion Henderson. I got Hubbard this week, but just barely. I think Travion could actually crush against Miami. He might have a breakout against the Dolphins. I wouldn't want to bench either this week, but Hubbard gets another good matchup against Arizona, and the volume is more unquestioned than Travion. Like, it was still relatively a split with Ramondre down the middle. With Hubbard, it's all his volume. So safer bet is Hubbard, higher upside is Travion. Ryan says I have Andrews and Ingram. I might drop Andrews, honestly. That feels hard to drop either. I think I just keep rolling with Andrews, but yikes. Yeah, I get the question now a bit more. Fannin feels like a better start than both of them next week, but rostering 3 tight ends is bad. Maybe drop Andrews. Andrews, I'd hit the panic button. Nino, is Beatty bad news for Harvey or still just give it time? Yeah, I'm not worried about Beatty. No worries about Beatty. Harvey was hyper efficient. Harvey had more yards than Dobbins on less than like half the touches. Harvey looked amazing in week 1. He'll only look better. Beatty is no threat. Not worried about Beatty at all. Nico says start Harold Fannin or Mark Andrews full PPR. Definitely Fannin. Andrews, that's who I'm more concerned about. Fade Andrews for sure. Trade Baker for Dak long term. I have both CD and Igbuka. I'd rather have Baker. Baker is definitely going to score touchdowns, and Baker also runs the ball. I'd rather have Baker than Dak for sure. Stick with Baker. Daniel says pick up Sampson or Judkins. I would want both. This week you can play Sampson. Long-term, Judkins has the higher value, but watch Judkins just have terrible karma and just like never actually move the needle. It's probably going to be Sampson who has the higher value. In my priority at running back, which you can rewind and start at the beginning of this video, you'll see that I have Sampson as the number 1 pickup. Sampson this week for sure. Jamie says don't hit the panic button on Andrews. Flowers hit his ceiling and will regress. Fair point, but like at some point likely he's going to get back on the field, and I really have some concerns on Andrews. Like there's not the car accident this year as the, reason for why you can give it some patience. I'd be worried about Andrews. He was not good. He was really bad. Like they scored 40 points and Andrews put up 1 target, 1 catch, and 5 yards. That's not good, man. That's bad. Likely, let me look. What's the status on Likely? He was ruled out for the game against the Bills. And I'm recording this on Tuesday night, so practice has not happened yet. We'll see tomorrow. Maybe Likely starts practicing. There is a projection for him, but odds are he's going to miss week 2 as well. I'm not expecting Likely to move the needle until like week 5 at the earliest, but that's why I'm like, yikes. Even if Andrews does pick up some steam, last week you can't feel good about starting him. Like, shit. 1 catch, 1 target, 5 yards. That's the worst case scenario for Andrews. He's really touchdown dependent in the first place. Now, if he has less than 10 yards, no volume to really speak of, like, shit, that's bad. That's really bad. But that was a weird game. They had some long runs. Flowers played really well because they didn't have Flowers in the playoff game, so maybe that was a bit too focused on in the game plan. Maybe don't cut Andrews, but I'd be more worried about Andrews long term. Shadow Days says, what do you think of Pacheco and Sharbs for Hampton in a 12-man PPR league? I would much rather have Hampton. There's a chance that Sharbs is like an amazing asset because Walker probably is injury prone again and comes off the field. But straight up long term, I'd rather have Hampton. And I think Pacheco is irrelevant. Pacheco has no value. So this is more so like a Hampton versus Sharbs. And you also, it's 1 for 2. I'd rather have the only one player versus the 2. Definitely give me Hampton in that trade. Ryan says trade Higgins for RJ Harvey and $50 on waivers. I have Jamar Chase. Now you're factoring in Fab. Like, I don't really know what to make of this. It's kind of late. I may call it. Those types of trade questions, I don't really know what to make of it. Probably not. I don't know. Nico says start Bo Nix or Justin Fields. I think I would still go Bo Nix. Alexander says Strange, Henry, Ferguson, or Johnson to pick up. I'd go Johnson, but I'd rather have Fannin over Juwan. And then Nico says flex Pearsall, Sutton, or Charbonnet. Pearsall for sure. However, if Purdy doesn't play, I would still go Pearsall. I would go Pearsall regardless. And then Twisted Folks says I got offered Aaron Jones, Odunze, and JMO for Kraft, Travis, and McLaurin. Was it close or was declining the right call? Travis Kelce? So 2 tight ends? This is weird. This is gonna be my last question. I would rather have the Terry side. I'm not sure, man. I'm a little too high to really know. I hate trade questions. I'm gonna be honest with you. I fucking hate the trade questions. Cause I it's hard to put your shoes, your feet in someone else's shoes to understand the whole makeup of their team and to know like, oh yeah, you can afford to give up 2 tight ends here. You know, you're not going to be completely fucked. Or you can afford to give up a running back for more receiver depth. Like, I don't know what you need. I don't know the depth. This is a weird fucking trade. I don't think I'd make a move. I think I'd stand pat. In general, I'm the type of stand pat type of person. I kind of like to stick with the karma I invested in at the draft. But all right. That's it for me. We live streamed for over 45 minutes, and I think it's time we call it a night. All right. See you next time. I'll have wide receiver rankings out tomorrow. We posted running back rankings earlier. And probably next week after I'm done with this live stream, it'll be only available for members only. But if you rewind, you can see all of my priority lists at every position earlier on in the video. Anyways, see you next time. Goodbye.